Hello, this is Dave Vasko, your host of State of the Industry, your guide to the future of smart manufacturing. Here, I'm with Mark Beckmann. He's the Director of Manufacturing Industry Solutions for Microsoft. And we're here broadcasting live on the show floor at Automation Fair. Now, Mark, you're working for Microsoft. You're looking at all these IoT technologies that are out there and artificial intelligence, machine learning. What's been your experience with people adopting these things today?
Well, I think there's a influx of people that have always been interested in Industry 4.0, and it's driving a lot of this. What's kind of interesting to me is that people talk about Industry 4.0, but then when they start thinking about industrial IoT, and smart manufacturing as a whole, they tend to be a little bit skeptical. And what we're finding actually is that people are starting to grab a hold of the fact that this is a reality and we need to start doing some of that. Now where they're doing a variety of different things. Right? They're looking at IoT, but it's interesting to see how some of the technologies are really helping them elevate their game in terms of quality, in terms of productivity, in terms of efficiency. So a lot of the things that we're seeing along those lines are kind of coming to fruition. And I like to think about things in terms of artificial intelligence really driving a lot of the discussions around IoT. IoT can give us great data on connectivity of the assets that we have, but artificial intelligence can really deliver some true value to manufacturers.
Yeah, so the IoT really sets the stage to give you the data that you need, the information, the context around that, where the artificial intelligence really gives you the tools to do something with it.
Exactly. I mean, interesting things on the quality front. All right. Can I, for example, take a manual process of inspection and use cameras in order to do a visual inspection, apply artificial intelligence to that, and build a model that says I can isolate the perfect board, the perfect product, the perfect weld, and then address quality from that perspective. The other thing, I mean, people started doing a lot with artificial intelligence in terms of predictive maintenance. Mm-hmm. That was always typically the first line of defense when people started down the IoT or Industry 4.0 path. We've seen a ton of that going on. A lot of it's with machine builders, for example, that are doing things to provide remote services to their clients through IoT connected machines. And applying the algorithms and models in order to give them predictive capability to see when a machine's going to fail. And you can have a whole line of automation and efficiency from that, from the machine side, but also from the fleet of technicians that actually have to go out and potentially maintain that machine.
That makes sense, because I mean, you think about maintenance times, when something's going to fail, it's not the same for every application. Depending on how hard to use it, or how lightly use it, it may fail different ways. And artificial intelligence, machine learning would seem like a natural way to really determine when is the best time to really make changes.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the things that has really come to pass is the fact that we can do so many of these things. We actually could do these things in the past, mm-hmm. to be perfectly candid, but what we didn't have is the ability to do them at a lower cost. Yep. And to really democratize the process so that more people can do it, and the technology just keeps going greater and greater, and technology really isn't holding us back anymore. Yeah. Technology is the enabler that allows us to do it, and it's up to us to come up with the dreams and the North Stars that we want to shoot for as we look to capitalize on those bits of technologies.
We've noticed that ourselves. I mean, to be honest, the vision of where we're going, we've had this vision for probably 2 decades, since we started connecting computers on the factory floor and PLCs on the factory floor through networks to each other. But the technologies really hadn't developed enough where they could be easily applied. And we're finding today they are. We have the networking, we have the artificial intelligence, machine learning we need, we have the processing power that we need, and the software we need.
Exactly, and to kind of build on that, what we've seen come to pass over this past several years is quite frankly this notion of democratizing the data. Yeah. Because what's happened in most manufacturers, while we could do those things, the data sources still lived in silos, right? And if you think about how do I get greater and greater efficiency out of this, how do I do continuous improvement on top of what we've done in the past, we need to deploy technologies, and the democratization of those technologies will really allow us to build on some of those capabilities.
That makes perfect sense. Now, Microsoft and Rockwell Automation have been partners for a long time. What's the role going forward with IoT Industry 4.0 with partnerships and the standards?
Well, maybe I can talk about that in two veins here.
Yeah.
I'll talk about our relationship with Rockwell, but I'll talk about the ecosystem in general. The interesting thing about Industry 4.0, Industrial IoT, smart manufacturing, I don't care what you want to call it, nobody has really mastered that, right? And the reality is that we need an ecosystem of partners. If we look at traditional manufacturing, I have mostly brownfield plants that I need to instrument and put in place. That probably has a different set of challenges in some things. In fact, quite frankly, we love the relationship that we have with you in terms of adding PTC into the equation. So the ecosystem of partners, be it systems integrators, vendors that, even the machine builders themselves, that ecosystem is pretty important to us. And to be able to address the whole solution is really what a lot of people are after. Now, what's interesting about our relationship with Rockwell, and if I want to add PTC in there as well, is we need, and I've always talked about blending OT, operational technologies, and IT. That's where our two organizations really excel, Rockwell on the OT side, Microsoft on the IT side. I think where people are going is more of how can I actually kind of have that out of the box? Can I plug in a controller, a PLC, and have it just work and connect into the infrastructure that I already have in place and get some significant value out of it by the data that's being driven off of a particular machine? Or even better yet, how can I blend all those silos of data that are coming off my machines, my assembly lines, my plant, so that I can build up a data lake or a single data source that tells me how my plant's working, but then how can I compare it with other plants that might be around the world so that I can continually improve, continue to look for best practices, adopt best practices that are used in other locations that we found, and create even greater and greater efficiency.
That makes sense. And I mean, we've seen more and more, you're driving the contextualization of data, you're establishing the causal relationships as low as possible. So when you start to use that data, now it has context, you can tell what you're doing with it, you can compare it against other sites, and within an enterprise to do optimization. That makes perfect sense. So this whole thing, there's all these different things that are helping us, the networking, the AI, the software that's helping us. What are some of the challenges we're facing with adoption of IoT and analytics in factories today?
There's several. You can start first with people and process. We can't ignore those. I mean, technology, as I kind of alluded to earlier, is not holding us back. But we've always done things the way we've done in plants, and we need to have some change management and culture changes in some cases in order to implement some of these technologies and change what we're doing. One of the greatest benefits that we see from thinking about exposing data in a plant organization itself, or a living, breathing plant essentially, is how can I give that to just about anybody in that plant to help affect their job? And we've seen manufacturers look at that and say, wow, we have people now talking from material handling into quality and production where we didn't have that before. So the collaboration even of itself is transforming the way really manufacturers do that. So people is kind of a key component of that too. If we start to think too from a technology perspective, an educational aspect of that is apropos. All right, so giving people the idea of what's possible, and I think that's incumbent upon our consortium between Rockwell, PTC, and Microsoft to help people understand that, number one. But number two is what can we do to help people understand the value that's being driven off of this? Yeah. A lot of the early IoT projects, to be candid, were kind of science projects. Right? Today we're seeing quality and how that's impacting things. We're seeing how we can get better inventory movement, how we can do more just-in-time type of things by applying the technologies to it. And those have real value to manufacturers. And that's kind of one of the hard parts that we saw earlier on, is how do we get the value out of just simply connecting assets or machines and driving real value to the organization.
Yeah, we're seeing some of the same challenges. I'll be honest, I see more culture change challenges with adoption than we do with technology. The technology seems much further ahead. but organizations really need to be able to take that technology in, adopt it, change the processes, which they work, like you mentioned, the processes, and really pull the entire workforce in. This is a case where the entire workforce, everybody in the plant is going to be working to try to make it better, and then get comfortable with a culture where it's going to be continuous change. You're going to commit every day, and you're going to try to make it better than the previous day.
Well, to me, what's interesting about that comment is we all know that we have a workforce issue in the organizations today. All right, many of the manufacturers I deal with have a workforce that's ready to retire.
Yeah.
Right? How do we convince that younger generation to come into the plant? Yeah. And I would assert to you that we need to have the same things that they have in their daily life. Smartphone applications, social media type of things. All of those things should be things that we think about adopting into the manufacturing plants so that we can attract that next generation of worker. I think too that artificial intelligence can play a role in that, because people are more productive when we kind of point them in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Artificial intelligence can help point people in the right directions in order to solve bigger problems. So take away some of the mundane things that they might have to do, automate that through artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, et cetera, applications that can help them do their job so that they can focus on the interesting things and the bigger problems in the manufacturing plant.
That makes perfect sense. The one thing I've noticed, you mentioned that things like mobility and tablets and those tools in the factory, but I've noticed that as the younger generation, as the generations coming into the new workers are coming into there, they're bringing those technologies with them. They're driving change. They're developing apps for the factory, and they're appreciated for doing it. Used to be when you came into a factory, it was more of a long apprenticeship.
Right.
But I'm seeing people walk in day one and really making an impact. And I think it's going to be a bright future for people entering manufacturing. And you mentioned technology. I also love the concept of using AR. And I know you do have the HoloLens, and the HoloLens 2 is going to start shipping very soon. We're just to get some.
Well, AI is by far one of the most interesting things that we're talking to manufacturers about right now. The second thing is augmented or mixed reality.
Yeah.
It has wonderful promises across the board, not for every use case, right? But we're seeing great opportunities from an educational perspective, going back to the workforce.
Yeah.
How do I convince a worker what it's really like in the plant? How do I give them the capabilities to see how to operate on a machine without having to put them at risk of any security or safety type of issue? So training being one. The second thing is, how can I help do maintenance in the plants? Right? We all know that there's experts and that guy that we can call in order to fix the machine. All right, but he might not be in the plant that day.
Yep.
And we can't afford downtime on that machine waiting for somebody or an expert that's in a different location. But augmented mixed reality gives us the opportunity to phone home and phone the expert so that we can potentially fix that machine over time.
I love the concept. We're actually doing remote witness testing that way today with the HoloLens headsets, where instead of shipping somebody to a factory to do the remote testing, we actually ship the headset, and we can actually do it on the factory today with somebody that's trained in the facility and the safety procedures for that facility. And that it makes a big difference.
It does. I mean, it kind of starts there. I mean, if you think about what we can do from a simulation perspective, even in just the plant, is the plant layout correct? And can we simulate process flows throughout that in order to optimize that? Can we bring in new equipment and turn over lines faster based off of the layouts that we can do using augmented or mixed reality to do that and simulate it what it really looks like in the real world before we actually go and deploy in the production line. And then I mentioned maintenance being a big one as well, and training. So
I think it makes sense. If you walk the show floor, you see so many of the headsets out there today. So I think that you're seeing real wide adoption, early adoption, but adoption of it.
Absolutely.
One thing I wanted to ask you about is there's a lot of talk about the cloud and the edge, and it seemed like when we were looking at a lot of analytics, we were pushing everything to the cloud at first, and there's been more of a trend to the edge. What's the best practice for using the cloud and the edge?
It's a relatively new area, and people are starting to talk more about the edge. I don't know as if people have figured out ultimately how they want to deploy that.
Yeah.
When it comes to artificial intelligence, though, I need the bulk of volume of data in some cases in order to build a model that I can actually deploy on the edge. Mm-hmm. If we start to think about what manufacturers need to do, they really need the full spectrum. Right? I need to have some edge capabilities that are close to the machine or the operator, but I need to have the masses of data that I can potentially use in order to build better and better models. And as I transform and actually as I transact business on that, those additional data points and what we did in order to address particular situations need to be rebuilt into the models that are deployed towards the edge. Now what's interesting is that edge computing is getting cheaper and cheaper, right? So we can deploy these models on a GPU or an FPGA chip in order to get closer to the edge. But at the same time, we still need information that tells us how our manufacturing operation is running.
Yeah, but there's economics to it. So the cloud, you could bring a lot of resources, and you could crunch a lot of data very efficiently, and then you could actually, we've actually seen people do reverse order models down on the factory floor. You're actually employing it there for that quick response, but it's really blending the best of both.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you just think about, just take CNC machines, right? I need to recalibrate them, right? Can I put some edge compute there that allows not a person to do it, but have the IoT-enabled machine, the CNC machine, actually tweak it and calibrate it, do it better, do it faster, and provide less downtime on it.
That is a great example. Mark, I've really enjoyed this discussion. This has been fascinating talking with you. I'm really looking forward to talking to you more. I thank you for being on the State of the Industry podcast. And I just want to invite listeners to tune in to State of the Industry podcast, your guide to the future of smart manufacturing.